very still. And I said, oh, here we go, Dad, we're focused, film's in the camera, it's cocked, it's ready to set off the exposure. 1, 2, and on 3, he turns and he looks at the camera. And I'm like, no, no. Look back in the mirror, and he says, the man in the mirror is looking at you. This is the next hurdle that I had to jump over. This was a really bad moment, because I thought he was still holding on to self, and he lost who self was all about, the identity. So I paused, do I stop making the photos? Do I end it here? And I'm like, I can't. I'm my father's son, I'm a soldier, I'm an artist. This needs to go forward. So I asked him, what do we think about the man in the mirror? And he said to me, he's a good man. And I said, I think he's a great man, and we both need to look at the man in the mirror. And so I made this photo that you see here. So again, Daddy sitting, September 24, 2003. At this point, he was eating on his own, but he wasn't doing well with a knife at all. And yes meant maybe yes, and maybe no meant maybe yes. We didn't know, the communication was getting harder and harder. And maybe it wasn't this particular meal, or maybe it was, now that I'm looking at it, it looks like a little piece of chicken. So I cooked him up some chicken, and I don't know what it is there, maybe possibly spinach or something. And all 3 of us kids all cook. Thanks to our family, we all cook. I am hugely grateful for that. So, Dad, would you like another piece of chicken? And he kind of went, bo. I'm like, oh, you must want another piece of chicken. And I remember putting it into his plate, and I turned around, and I got the chicken right in my face. So I realized, oh, you really don't want a piece of chicken. So he was still expressing himself that way.
Are his eyebrows gone too?
So you caught him one time. So Rose went in, she's like, oh my God, he was like shaving everything. He started shaving off his eyebrows, and he was going for the hair. So yeah, a couple of times there he had no eyebrows. And this is a man who's a dandy. Remember the early photos and how, so really well, incredibly well dressed, which I totally failed at. So, but here I am silhouetting myself, I'm still locking him in frame. I'm into film noir now, right? All those spooky movies, that there's something that's off. So I'm bringing that into these frames that you see, and about to get ready to eat a piece of food with him. Again, he's still, by the way, and this should be noted that he was very aware of the camera through most of the stages of Alzheimer's. That when the camera came into play, he was the center of attention. And so I noticed that in later stages in the Alzheimer's, that I would literally just start to move the camera and he would move with it and follow it around the room. And then only into the most advanced stages that finally the camera disappeared, and that's later in years. But I was amazed by how important that was as a conduit between the 2 of us, because it was so hardwired into him that these events of making these photos. So now we jump ahead to, actually it was, I think late summer of 2004 that he was admitted to a nursing home. I don't have any photos in Marlborough Hospital. Is that where he ended up briefly?
He went briefly.
Yeah. And I was photographing him out the vineyard and came back after the fact. But I didn't make really good photos in the nursing home for the first couple of months. And the reason for that is that I didn't know how to photograph an institutional environment. That the photos, I took hundreds of photos, but they look like institutional environments, which are really boring as a hell. Fluorescent light overhead, stark walls, people in and out of focus in the background. It wasn't how I saw my father as an artist. And it took me a couple months to figure it out. By December 5th, this was the first successful photo that I made. And at this point I'm wheeling them around and looking for where can I photograph Gene? And I realized that a lot of it had to do with sun illuminating him, or some kind of light. So here he is in the hallway by December 5th. Also, I have to tell you, is that when I walked in there at the end of August with this big, huge camera, I was stopped at the front desk. And the receptionist said, you can't go into this building, or come in this building with this camera. And I'm like, oh, no, I'm an artist and I'm photographing Stephen DiRado, who's just admitted here. Well, there's privacy to our residents. I'm like, oh, no, trust me, I'm only going to photograph Gene. I made this a job years ago, and I always carry it with me. And I have one here today. I always carry it, not with the slipcase, but I make books all the time, handmade books. I make these books. And I had one with me. And I said, this is what I do. And they're like, oh, okay, that's what you do. And I was allowed to go upstairs and photograph him. Now I'm stopped at the nurse's desk. And the nurse says, what are you doing? This is what I do. And she says to me, "You think you're gonna be here and photograph your father, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, of course. This is my father, and I'm an artist, and this is my way of communicating. You won't be here long. Nobody's here long. They all go away. They all go away."
That was the receptionist?
Yeah. And the upstairs nurse at the nurse's station. And I said to her, "It's my job, and nobody's going to fire me except for me." And I kept going. Of course I did, 2-3 times a week during the school year, during the summertime, every few weeks, because I was working on another project. And I saw families come. And I saw families go. And we all did that. And I became like an unofficial artist in residence at this point. I actually liked going to the nursing home. There was something really genuine about it. And there was something so heartfelt and so loving by all the caretakers there. And nobody notices, but I noticed. And I loved them all. And I loved how they treated all of the residents there. And some of those residents were sons of bitches.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, if you start out in this world as a mean SOB, guess what? You end up being even worse. But if you come into this world being a really nice person, even with dementia, you kind of hold on to that. And these nurses and these assistants are fully aware of that. And I became so respectful for this. And they were so respectful for me as an artist. And there was so many times that they took my breath away and the things that they had to say about their lives and what they do, and me coming into their world, and respecting them. Like, I never called Gene Dad. I always called Dad Gene. Yeah, I got it right. Dad Gene. Gino. And they did. And, no, let me get this right. I gotta get this right because that won't come out right. So I called him Gino, like they did. We got that, right? I didn't call him Dad. Does that make sense? Now it does. So, and they would say, "Stephen, really, we respect you." And I'm like, "Oh, well, why is that?" "You call Gene or Gino like we call him, because he's our child. He's no longer yours. He's our family." Yeah, and it's stuff like that over and over and over and over, with visit after visit after visit. And they would say, "What do you see today? What is happening?" And I would say, look at Elizabeth's hair and what's happening with the sun hitting it. And it's like her aura, her spirit. And they really appreciated those moments as well.
You're talking about the Haitian workers too, though.
They were amazing.
Yeah.
They were the best. I mean, we saw all of us milks poured all over them, and they'd still be feeding the resident. And I'm like, "Is it not Gerama? Do you remember him, James? It wasn't James, like Gerama. Wonderful person." I have to go back into my notes. But the milk is dripping, and I'm like, "Oh, can I get? Oh no, it's fine. It's just milk. They didn't mean it." And continue feeding through. This is just as a kind of an anticlimactic. But it's a shot of how I function in there, how I work. So you see the 8x10 view camera on a tripod and a reflector, and there is Gene, just, again, because he's been photographed a trillion times over, the camera is there, comforting, but not for the smiley face.
That lady on the left was always watching us.
Yeah, that's Elizabeth.
Quietly.
Yeah, she was great. She's all about 4'11".
She had
beat the shit out of you.
sophistication.
Yeah. Yeah, she gave you shit, but she loved Gene. She'd always go and touch his hand and hold his hand. So, matter of fact, while we got her here, and I don't know if she shows up. So, there was a point in the middle of this project that a friend of mine, Simon James, who was the writer for the Royal British Photographic Society magazine from London, calls me up and he says, "I want to fly out and do an article about you photographing your father." And I'm like, "Sure." So Simon flies out, and we go to the nursing home, and he watched me work for a good afternoon, and he said to me, "I can't write the article." He was going to write it for the London Times. And I'm like, "Well, sure, I can't write it for you. What are you talking about?" "It's too depressing. I'm dealing with a stepfather right now who is ailing, and it's just too close to home." And then he said to me, "Is there any kind of quality to life here?" And I was a little pissed off about that. And again, just on cue, Elizabeth, the lady on the left-hand side, out of nowhere came up to my father and grabbed his hand and held it. And I said to him, "If that's not quality of life, I don't know what it is." And he went on to write about dinners, right?
Yep.
He went on to write about dinners that I photographed. So then, 6 months later, some of you know Brian Goslow. Peter, you're here someplace. But a couple of you know Brian Goslow, who wrote for Worcester Magazine. There you go. And so Brian said, "Stephen, I want to come and write an article for Art Scope magazine, which is a New England-wide art magazine about you photographing your father. Brian absolutely come to the home. He came twice. He's writing this article. His father dies. And he's over there, I can't do this. I gotta put it on hiatus for at least 6 months. I just gotta work it out that my father just died. So then Chet Williamson, writing for Worcester Magazine, and actually I'm actually jumping the gun, I actually show this later on, calls me up and says, I heard that this project your father's jinxed, and nobody's writing anything about it. I want to do it tomorrow, Thursday. It's like Wednesday, so fine. So I brought Chet with me, and he wrote the article, and I'll save the final to that when we come to the actual image. But here we go, here's Rose. Why are you here January 9th in 2005? You're not around in January.
Probably stayed home.
Stayed home for a part of that winter, came back for Christmas. Because you did come back for Christmas, a couple. So anybody who remembered Frankie the dog? There's a little cameo there in the lower left-hand side. So Frankie would come to the nursing home with me, and in the advanced stages of my father's Alzheimer's, I have to stand up. I'd walk you at Frankie, my father goes, I'm like, Dad, I gotta boil them for 3 days before you start to eat them. So, yeah, my father didn't quite, even if he liked the dog, but maybe with a little salt and pepper, I don't know. So, again, you have to have a sense of humor. Walking in an Ash
See
Wednesday.
the doll and the lady was holding a doll.
Yeah, no, the narrative here is just incredible.
Yeah,
it really
yeah.
is. And again, I don't normally include other people, but I had to in this case. All these people are long passed away since. And, Ash Wednesday, just walking in, straight on, nothing symbolic about this other than the symbol of the cross. And then here, March 20. By the way, the photos are increasing. They're not every other year anymore. They're happening every other week, the good ones, because I'm figuring it out. So we have a faux fireplace. But everything is faux in that world. Everything is flat. Everything is just surface without any depth. So another metaphor here. This is... he's had a number of strokes, but I call it the second big stroke. So here's my mother with Gene at UMass Hospital, room 721, May 10th, 2004. And he's got a gash on his head from falling when he had the stroke.
He had a stroke and he fell.
Fell, right in the center of his head. And I am lighting these. This isn't a room where I put the flash over by the window to give you all this drama. This stuff is boring, flat light, right, when you go to these places. But as an artist designing everything to make the story accessible, and I want you not to feel that. I want you to look at these, get there, that's the whole point. But there is a lot of thought in these. Not to mention the emotional thoughts that are going through my head that I'm like nervous as hell that I'm even doing this. So here's Gina's hand in front of our father. He couldn't touch it. Do you remember this time? He could not touch your hand. And there's a glass of milk right there too as well. So, and all that's left to do is to come in close and adore him and sometimes hug and hold him. This is 2005. This is a Fellini movie. This is Stephen DiRado with the cast of characters, my wife Donna on the left-hand side, and the body language says it all. But Stephen DiRado, that's your world. And it's all out of focus, and there's all these shapes, and all of this metal, and all these wheels.
What's his reaction to you at the camera all the time?
Nothing. It's just there. At this point, it's just there. It's part of me. And and I used to, by the way, I'll go back to these books. So I would make smaller versions of these books and constantly update it. And I would walk in just to show people what I do. And it became a thing with a lot of the families that did, some of them that did stick around. And visiting nurses were even better. And visiting nurses were on to me. They're like, did you bring your latest book? And I was like, yeah, I did. And they would sometimes, and if they cried, I would say, it's yours. And I would sign it right then and there and date it, kind of as a time capsule, to see if they'll ever come back in my life years later. So everything to me is connected as art. So I must have about 15 to 20 of these little smaller versions of this that are out there in the world that are dated the exact moment that I gave them away. His 78th birthday, here's Rose and Gina and the cake. Just like the little birthday photos you saw of us as kids. And this is just, Mom said, you gotta make a straight photo of us, color photo for real. You gotta make a real photo. So here is a real photo. October 30th, 2005, with the family all around Jean. And then here is October 30th, 2005, and this is Rose telling a ghost story to her nieces that you see in the room.
Grandchildren.
Grandchildren, I'm sorry, grandchildren. And my nieces.
Yeah.
And Chris has replaced our father sitting at the head of the table on the left-hand side. And there's that window, there's all the things we talked about, that table. And here we are again in 2005. This is what Gene eats for Christmas in 2005. Basically pablum, just some kind of nutrient. Chris, I think this is your, right? This was you coming into the camera. Here's, I'm holding Dad, I'm hugging him, I'm holding him a lot more. Gene's ear, 2006. My love for astronomy and the moon waxing and waning. This is to me a waning moon. It's turning its face away. And what the dark side of the moon is this ear. And it's what the same ear that we all as children want to whisper into our parents. And so that's what this represented. This is just great. This is National Nursing Home Week. I love that. So, and they just, this is like a whole week of party, and, musicians came in and played away, and it's one of the few that I brought everybody in focus. I had to do it. I just had to do it. So here's Gene in the foreground, and that's one part of your brain that stays connected, that everybody has, not me, I have 2 left feet, but everybody else has a rhythm that they hold on to in the advanced stages of some form of dementia. This is just another kind of tiny show of all kinds of things happening in one frame. So I'm going to show you this, and I'm going to show you this. Fading to black. So, my father could have been in a cosmopolitan national city, London, England, and nobody would have cared. Right? It would have been great for me, for my resume, that I have something in the London Times. I could have been in an art magazine, New England wide, but my father ended up in a local magazine, Worcester Magazine, on the cover. And when I walked in a couple of days later when this came up, he was a rock star. They had like 1,000 of these magazines at the front desk. He was like the top of the world. He was a celebrity. So fate had it that was the right venue. It couldn't have been better. Now they know that I was for real. And that I was really doing this for purpose as opposed to just being weird. Mom feeding him. Again, bars and bars and bars and bars. November 17th. Another Christmas morning, walking in and finding him by the nurse's station. All right. We're going to take a tiny bit of break here. And what I mean by that, between 2000 and 2006, I was photographing on Martha's Vineyard. I've been photographing on the vineyard for over 31 years. But I never shed tears when I was in the nursing home. I was nervous because I didn't know if I could make art that was good enough for my father. And I never let go of it. I would getting in my car to drive to Marlboro, 18 minutes away. I always I'm coming down with the flu. Oh, I have a cold. I'm going to infect everybody. Oh, I think I'm going to go back to bed. No, get in that car. Go to work right now. You're going to work or I'll fire you. Okay, I'll go to work. I'll go to work. But I don't know what I'm going to do. But of course, the minute I get there, I go to work and I make my photos. By the way, and I would drive home, Route 20. I'd go buy what no longer exists, Newberry Comics, and buy myself a little gift because a used DVD. Because that was just my way of saying you were a good boy. You did your job. But I never ever shed tears. And here I'm on Martha's Vineyard. And there's this bridge down there. If anybody's been there, that they call the Jaws Bridge. Right, exactly. Bill knows it. And, or the Jump Bridge. And it's where vacationers, Elaine Gordon jumped off this. I got pictures. So, all it takes is once. I couldn't do it. So, people would just jump off this bridge. And I always thought it was like below me as an artist to even stop the car, to even spend some time there. But a little voice said, you know what? Photograph the jump bridge. And I'm like, that little voice has told me to do so many good things in my life. Great trust. And I didn't ask it anything. I just stopped and I just started watching people jump. And I had to downsize. I bought, through a grant, a smaller, medium format camera for those of you into cameras. It still could be handheld, but it took a larger film, 2.25 film. It was a Mamiya. The Mamiya. But I got this wonderful grant to buy because they're like $5,000. And every day, for 5 or 6 years, I went midday, I went 12 to 2, which is the worst light for anybody who knows photography. You don't photograph during that time because it's directly overhead, it's very harsh, it's just you want early daylight or late light. And I decided, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it in the shittiest light possible and try to make it very difficult to do. And so every day I went, and I brought with me a flash, too, also to highlight these subjects. And I was finding these great symbols out of something so common. This is an albino holding onto his hat with number 1. He's never going to land in the water. He's just going to float away.
Wow.
And about a year into this project, I found myself tearing up. I'm literally wiping tears away from my eyes. And I realized I was letting go of Jean at the bridge. That I wasn't doing it in a nursing home, and I'll bring you to the next one. I shot thousands of pictures, by the way. But can you, this one here, I don't know, again, the foot is just leaving the railing, the hand just let go, and she's preparing herself for, you might want to call it the afterlife, or something unknown that waits her. And I realized that I was capturing different stages of possible death, or what waits for all of us. This is a guy that just got out of his car, ran across the street, hit the railing, and went flying into the earth and into the water. And I happened to be there at that very second to capture this. This is not Photoshop. I am not a Photoshop guy. I'm into the moment, and I'm into symbolism and things coming my way and reading into things all the time. This little girl is going to defy death. She's Superwoman. This is friends helping friends. One is elevated, the other one actually got pulled over. This was a show at the Decorative Art Museum in 2007, I think, 2007 to 2008, called Jump. And then we go back, sadly, to the nursing home. And this is just a bad day. This is a day that Dad had a tic, where he was about every second taking his hand from his chest and then hitting his head. His chest and hitting his head. And I was with another photographer. It wasn't you, Bill, was it you? Somebody was with me that day. I can't remember who it was. But I walked in, and to the horror of the person that was with me, I had a number of, Bill, who's an amazing photographer, a dear friend here, came, and Chris videotaped a lot of this, which we're going to edit and do something with that. We're just far enough away from all of this that we can sanitize our history and we can get these stories out. That's how I see this work. So I walked in, and this photographer said, "Oh my God, you can't photograph Dad like that." I'm like, "But this is the disease. I have to document the disease." And I'm like, a matter of fact, I'm going to leave the lens open to give you in one frame what this is all about. So I made this photo, and this photographer said, "You can't show that to the world." I'm like, "What? I don't know that yet. I'm going to have to develop a negative and see if it's going to say anything that is important to the disease." And I said, "Do you want me to lie? Do you want me to tell you, would you want me to create a narrative that's totally fake right now?" So my camera's already cocked, ready to go, sheet of film on the camera, and I have a little squeeze ball, right? So I walked up to Gene and I went, "Gene!" And he's still doing this. And I grabbed his shoulders and I went, "Gene!" And I butt his head with mine. And he stopped. And he looked at me and he smiled. And I hit the shutter, and then he went back to this. And I said to this person, "You tell me which one is about the disease."
So is that a long exposure?
That's a 1 second exposure. Yeah, 1 second
And
exposure.
there's Elizabeth.
Yeah, right there in the background again, yeah. And then, this is a warm April night singing away, and it was probably about 60-ish degrees. And I just wanted him to just experience the sun on his face and listen to the cardinals. And that was what it was all about. It was living in the moment. And so a lot of families would come in, new families, and they would say, "Oh, Dad, you always like hot chocolates," or "Let me, read a poem." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's kind of over with. You got to live in the now. You can't bring back history. You have to live in the moment and make this happen to them." And people, for the life of them, could not do that. And if they couldn't do that, they were doomed not to come back. You have to live in the now. I really believe in that with everything. Forget a nursing home. There's so much that I learned here by working on this project. It really changed my life. Here's just a very sweet day. September 1st, 2008. This is September 28th, 2008. Donna, I'm going to give you shit. So Donna would always say, "Oh, I like going to the nursing home." And I'm like, "Yeah, you always have your bag by your side and ready looking at the door to get the hell out." No, I really do. Screw you. This is Gene, on our left is his sister, Betty, and on our far right is Gina's hand. So we have old elders and youth, both holding on to Dad. And this is a day that he was just slumped over like this. He was comfortable. I don't know if you remember this day. But I had to make this photo happen. There was just no way I could do it other than literally taking this huge beast off of its tripod and cradling it and jumping up on the table and leaning on the table with this flash held directly overhead. This is like one of those impossible photos to do. But because the stars are all lined up, I actually got this photo. It really is a like 1 in 1,000 shot to make it work. This one here is December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas, and the 3 siblings standing around our father in 2008. This is my mother Rose just showing the arthritis, showing my father's hand. We saw his hands early in the game. And this is on a June 7th. Now, okay, this is, we're coming near the end. This is June 7th. The photos are happening fast and furious now. Here's June 9th, 2009. There was this urgency to photograph him as much as possible. I was putting everything else aside. I was, Mom would say, I'll meet you there. I'll meet you there. I'll be there before you get there. I just felt I needed to make these photos a lot at this point. Here he is with a black eye, holding on to this little toy that you see. And also, he broke through something at this point. He didn't seem angry anymore. He seemed at peace. And he was very childlike. And we get he was coming back in a way that we're getting a lot more smiles from him. All right, so that's June 9th. Here's June 11th. And again, the light in here was so bad. I'm so sorry. But I'm reflected in the window back there with my camera. And then here we are to September 18, 2009. And he's becoming more abstract. Thus, there's the surrealistic photo. See the chair on the left-hand side is a chair, but it's a shadow. And Rose is reaching out to him. But also, can you see me in this photo as a shadow? Yeah, I'm projected onto his shirt. So there I am as well. So this is a very Dali-esque kind of surrealistic image. And I'm feeling that things are coming apart at the seams.